Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power's Save Our Game. Donating at least 100,000 to Irish football via England goals this summer. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Very good morning and you're welcome along to another episode of the Euro 2020 show here on Off the Ball. Shane Hannon with you for the duration of the entire tournament. It might be a Monday, but there are 4 games across the European Championships today across the continent, so plenty of action to look forward to. We're live as always in all of the usual places here on the Euro 2020 show. We're live on the OTB SPORTS radio station. That's on the OTB SPORTS app, which you can download for free in the App Store or indeed the Play Store. And we're live on video now as well, youtube.com/Off the Ball. We're on Facebook and we're on Twitter at Off the Ball as well. We are live as well on our OTB Sports Euro 2020 show with Paddy Power's Save Our Game, donating €10,000 to Irish football for every goal England scored at the Euros. Unfortunately for Irish football, I guess, they didn't score against the Scots. There is still that game against the Czech Republic to come though in the group, and Raheem Sterling scored against the Croats, which put €10,000 in the kitty as well. Over the coming couple of weeks, I'll be joined by plenty of Euros legends, football insiders, journalists as well, and people inside the camps to discuss that day's games. Damien Delaney will be with us very shortly now this morning, and a different member of Team Off the Ball every single weekday morning on the Euro 2020 show. And this morning, Adrian Barry is gracing us with his presence. Morning, Adrian.
Morning, Shane. Shirt game very strong again today.
Mustard number. I've gone for the mustard number. I had a fairly dodgy one with Phil Egan last week, but this is very relaxed shirt for me. I think this is up more in the normal scale of things. Have you
a full suite of whatever number of days, 30 days, whatever it is you're going to be presenting the show that you're going to cycle through, or are we already in sort of repetition territory?
I've got really, really bad ones that I think I might save for like the tail end of the tournament. For the final episode, I'll just go all out. I won't care at that stage. So I think the mustard's decent. It's a cord mustard shirt, Adrian. But look, there's a few more left in the closet. To be fair,
I admire the fact that you're already suggesting that some of the shirts that you've worn up to this point have been decent. I do admire that optimism.
That kind of puts it in perspective. To be fair, unfortunately. Adrian, what a weekend. I was talking on the Euro 2020 show here on Thursday and Friday, raving about how great this tournament was, and we kind of worried about the fact that it was 24 teams. The lack of quality the quality might suffer as a result of there being 24 teams. But I'll tell you what, after that weekend, and it started with the England-Scotland game on Friday night, and it just continued into the Group F, Group of Death, and even Italy-Wales yesterday, Italy B team against the Welsh. And this tournament has brightened up my hopes and lightened up my summer. Has it done the same for you?
Yeah, I refuse to call that the Group of Death, by the way. We were, myself and Owen on OTB AM pre-tournament, saying that that's a load of nonsense, that it's a group with 3 very strong teams in it, all of whom are probably going to make the knockout stages. So I'm putting a nail on that one straight away. It's not the Group of Death, it's the group of 3 very strong teams. And actually, as it turns out, like, which of the groups is not a Group of Death? And I'm not sure any of us were really expecting that. Now, you can see with the one group that's finished, when you get into the final round of games, there can end up being a nice bit of disparity between the team that eventually goes on to win it and the others. So, like, I don't want to get too carried away with the idea, like with Italy obviously having broad daylight between themselves and Wales and Switzerland, and Turkey very much being the Turkeys of that group. You might end up with the same in Group B and in some of the other groups as well. But I think all of the groups pretty much, I think, have something to play for all of the teams going into the final round, as unlikely as it might be for the likes of North Macedonia or Hungary or some of those lesser sides. But it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it, I have to say. I had the absolute pleasure of being away for a couple of days and actually been able to enjoy Scotland, England on Friday night with a pint in hand. So I was delighted. And do you know what, Shane? I decided I'd make it a bit more interesting for myself late in the game, where Rashford came on, was at sort of 15 minutes to go, and I thought I'd put down a couple of quid on him, on England winning 1-0, and Marcus Rashford being the goal scorer. Now, I mean, sort of 4 or 5 minutes into Rashford's appearance, I realised that it wasn't going to be a huge improvement on Harry Kane. But it did mean that I was cheering England on to the final whistle.
It's a tournament that kind of messes with your expectations, because I was one of those turkeys that predicted Turkey to be dark horses in this tournament, and they completely let me down and let the other hipster pundits down, because it's hard to predict. And like, Turkey coming into this tournament, 3 goals conceded. Nobody conceded less goals than that Turkish defence did. They took 4 points off France, and then it just went tails up for them in the group stage. But like, have your predictions pre-tournament in terms of winners, dark horses, changed as a result of the group stages we've seen so far?
this is going to obviously sound stupid now what I'm about to say, and look at it's not new territory for me in that regard.
I was going to say
I was in on England beforehand, to be honest, and I'm going to stay with it. I think that there's been a lot obviously written and said about the game on Friday night, about the impact it might have on England's prospects, but I'm just not sure. And we'll talk to Damien about it in a bit, but I'm not sure that obviously they want to go and beat Scotland 3-0, get the momentum from that, be in a sort of position where they're going to top the group no matter what happens heading into the final round, and all the momentum and positivity that comes with that. That's not what happened. But they're 4 points from 2 games. Heading into the final game is on Wednesday. We'll probably go ahead and top the group with 2 wins and a draw, you would think. And I think that it's a tournament as well, you know what I mean? The teams regularly sort of feel their way into it. You'd maybe not expect them to fire on all cylinders all the way through. It does start to have to happen for them soon, I think, is the one thing. And I think that maybe there are reasons for that. I think that maybe they get Maguire back in. I saw Gareth Southgate saying the other day that he's going to play Harry Kane no matter what happens the next day. And it's a bit of foolishness maybe about that, Shane, even in terms of keeping Kane on his toes a bit, he's the captain, and yes, when he's scoring, you got to have him in there clearly, but it's a lot of blind faith maybe at the minute. Would it be the worst thing to rest him out on Wednesday night? Take him out of the firing line, literally, let somebody else at it, give him a bit of a rest, get some rest minutes in the body, build up the confidence a bit off the pitch. I don't know. I think maybe get him out of there. But look, having said all that, I've gone for England beforehand. The Scotland game was certainly a bit of a sideswipe to that prediction. But there's no point in me jumping ship now. I'm sticking with them.
Stick with them. Yeah, no, the Harry Kane thing's fair point. I mean, if you're Dominic Calvert-Lewin sitting on that bench thinking, right, the next couple of days before our next game, I need to impress in training to get in. But then you're hearing your manager straight after the game saying, no, Harry Kane's going to play. So motivation in terms of strikers like Calvert-Lewin who want to get in the team, don't make any bones about it. It's a strange one to see your manager doing that. But yeah, he's getting ahead of the media circus that's going to arrive over the coming days, I guess. You texted me on WhatsApp this morning, Adrian, within the last hour, some very bad news out of Scotland, and the Scottish FA releasing a statement. From a playing perspective, bad news. They're confirming that Billy Gilmour has tested positive for COVID-19. So this statement says, having liaised with Public Health England since the positive test was recorded, Billy will now self-isolate for 10 days and therefore miss tomorrow's Euro 2020 Group D match against Croatia at Hampden Park. So, we were all aboard the Scottish bandwagon on Friday night and thinking, OK, they go into this Croatia game knowing a win can do it, and Croatia aren't all that. Based on their performance against England in the opening game. They're still a great team, no doubt, but this is a body blow for this Scottish team, Adrian.
Isn't it incredible? I think I'm right to say that was his first competitive start.
Yeah.
Isn't it incredible that after just one game that everybody's now sort of considering that Scotland's hopes of making the knockout rounds have dealt such a significant blow that he's now gone. But it's true. He was so good the other night for somebody so young and with that sort of experience profile. The other concern, obviously, Shane, is I know Spain had a similar situation. I actually time to because it's only happened, as you say, in the last little while to have a look. But I think Spain had a similar situation just before the tournament, and it wasn't a thing that impacted on other members of the squad, maybe beyond one or two. And I think that Scotland will be very much hoping. I think that they're a bit like ourselves. They don't have the capacity to be stripped of too many of their good players because the depths just aren't there, obviously. So it's a massive blow. It's going to dictate a change here for Steve Clarke. He's going to have to do something. Does Scott McTominay move a bit further back up the pitch? No matter what the options are, Stuart Armstrong's there, no matter what the options are that he goes with, none of them have the capacity to play football like Billy Gilmour, and that's going to be a difficulty for them as they work through it. You just hope that it is an isolated case, that he goes off and gets isolated. I don't think, I've seen some chat about whether it have any impact on England. I think that they just deem that it was outdoors. Somebody was making the gag that nobody would have got, none of the England players were that close to Gilmour anyway, so they'd be absolutely fine. But that they wouldn't be considered to be close contacts, I don't believe. I think we've seen that in other sports as well before. So best case scenario for Scotland from here is that it's just Billy Gilmour, that he isolates for the period of time and is back, that they make the knockout rounds, that they can do that, and he gets back for it.
You just hope that they don't lose now to Croatia, and you think, what if Billy Gilmour had been in that team? It kind of brings us on nicely to the rolling all-stars, Adrian, my team of the tournament that's been changing across the tournament. So we can bring you the team I had as of Friday. Now clearly a lot has changed, but the team I had on Friday is up on screen now. So Vaclav of the Czech Republic in goals. The back four was Dumfries for the Netherlands, Joe Rodon for Wales alongside Martin Skriniar for Slovakia, and Matthijs de Ligt, who I snuck into my team at left back because I'm the gaffer, as I said on Friday. I can do whatever I want with my team. The midfield, Aaron Ramsey for Wales, Paul Pogba of France, and two Italians then, Manuel Locatelli of course, who's had a great tournament, with Berardi on the wing, and I had Romelu Lukaku and Cristiano Ronaldo up top. I've made 4 changes, Adrian, to this team. So out comes Vaclav in goals, and in goes Szczesny, the Polish keeper, who had a good performance the other night against Spain, saved a penalty as well in that match, so I felt he should come in for the Czech keeper. Dumfries still at right back. Joe Rodon keeps his place in defence. I've put Kieran Tierney of Scotland into this team. So Tierney's in place of Milan Skriniar. In fact, it's 5 changes I've gone with. Robin Gosens is in. You're going to rip this team apart probably, no doubt, but De Ligt is out, Gosens is in after that incredible performance against the Portuguese. Ramsey keeps his place in midfield. He played well enough against the Italian B team yesterday. Shaqiri is in. Xherdan Shaqiri is in place of Paul Pogba. Pogba didn't do much wrong, to be fair to him, in the game against Hungary, but still, Shaqiri scored a couple of goals in their win over Turkey last night. Billy Gilmour is in my team. I put this team together last night. I've cursed him. Unfortunately, he's going to have to come straight back out of this team because he's tested positive, as we said, for COVID. So poor Billy Gilmour has lasted all of 10 seconds in my team. I took him in for Locatelli, which is probably a bit harsh on Locatelli. He's done nothing wrong. He was just rested yesterday. Berardi was also rested, but I've kept him in because I couldn't proceed without at least one Italian in this team, to be fair. And I've kept Romelu Lukaku and Cristiano Ronaldo up top. So I don't know what you make of that team. Adrian, Marco Verratti will be into this team eventually. He was very impressive in the first game back. Joshua Kimmich for Germany was another impressive player that will probably feel unlucky not getting into my team, because I know there'll be sleepless nights for these players waking up to the news that they're not in my team on the Euro 2020 show here and Off the Ball. But still a decent team, I think. It's
the recency bias team of the Euros.
Pretty much.
What you're saying here. This is not like a rolling team of quality. Like Gostin's obviously really good against Portugal, but like really poor against France, and so I mean, I know, so that's why I'm calling it your recency bias. And I think the same applies to, you know, if somebody puts their hand up against a no mark 11, you've got them straight in there, Shane. I can see the way you're rolling with this. I think that, like, I'm surprised that, maybe surprised is the incorrect word given your United fandom that people, I'm sure a lot of people are aware of, that Lindelof wasn't considered here. Like, he's certainly headed towards a player that could be included in a team of the tournament at the end of it. And like I realise again the ridiculousness of such a comment, but brilliant against Spain, same against Slovakia, yet to concede a goal. A really good chance that Sweden will end the group stages without conceding because they've Poland in the last round. So I think he's a player you can't look past. Against Slovakia, whatever, but Spain for sure. That's a good achievement. They will make the knockout stages, it seems, at this stage, with a win and a draw so far. So I think with those sort of teams, I am clearly saying that you're just picking it on whatever you've seen last night, and I'm going to stick by that. But it is difficult. They're difficult. You could have 30 players in there.
You could. Like, the logic is that by the end of the tournament, by the later stages, the players who have gone deep into the tournament will be the ones who will remain, and the really good ones who had good group stages can maybe hold on if they can. But like the likes of Shaqiri won't be in this team at the end. Billy Gilmour will.
Well, you'll have forgotten, Shane, all the good performances. You'll as we move into, like, there'll be players who've been brilliant for their teams, like Billy Gilmour, for example, who hopefully we'll see later on in the tournament, and will be gone before the semi-finals. But you'll have them long forgotten. What I'm saying is specifically your final level is going to be made up of only players who featured in the final.
It'll just be 11 Italians, I think, at this rate. But we also have on the show this morning Damien Delaney, the former Irish international. Morning, Damien. How are you keeping?
Morning, lads. How are you?
Keeping well, Damien, keeping well. Another exciting weekend. We have that news that we were speaking about there, Damien, about Billy Gilmour testing positive for COVID-19. And look, we all watched that match on Friday night and really, really enjoyed it from the national anthems onwards, when as the English fans booed Flower of Scotland and the rest of us got pumped for that match. It was it fairly lived up to expectations. An exciting enough 0-0 draw, but this news of Billy Gilmour is out for what appears to be 10 days of self-isolation is a big, big blow for Scotland.
Yeah, on the face of it, it does seem to be a hammer blow, especially with the draw against England, giving them a chance of getting out of the group. You want your best players on the pitch. But I think the Scottish team is built on the collective, and they will hopefully be able to dig out a performance even without him. Now, he is obviously the sprinkles on top, or the stardust that you're looking for. But I think over the course of Steve Clarke's reign, it's been all about the collective, and it was his first competitive start, so it's not like he's a mainstay. It's not like, you know, England missing Harry Kane or Spain missing out on Morata, you know, that type of player who plays a huge part in what they do. So they've coped without him before. They've got some fantastic results in the past without him before, and I just hope that we get to see him later on in the tournament, hopefully, because that performance was something special for a guy with so little experience, even at club level. You know, it's the testament to Chelsea's academy that they are able to produce these players. I saw it firsthand a few years ago when we took Ruben Loftus-Cheek on loan. Similar situation where he was coming out of Chelsea's under-23s, hadn't played any first-team football, but he came in with all his hype because of the stuff he'd done for England underage teams. And we were all kind of thinking, yeah, he can't be that good. He's not experienced. He's not playing the first team. But I tell you, the first training session, we all went, there you go. That's why. You know, superb player. They're really well coached. They're really well drilled. They're well prepared for when they step out into first team football. And Billy Gilmour showed exactly that on the weekend.
Like this idea that Gareth Southgate doesn't know his best 11 seems to be following him around, and yet look, they've played 2 games, they haven't conceded any goals, they've got 4 points. So all this talk of disaster, maybe it's not quite disaster, but it's a lot of negativity in the English press, and certainly after that game, a lot of the focus was on Harry Kane, as we mentioned. Would you be worried about Harry Kane's, I guess, lack of form in the opening 2 games, or are we all getting ahead of ourselves, or the English media just losing their heads as they usually do in a major tournament?
Well, I think the hype that was surrounding England going in, that's why people are expecting, you know, the levels of hype that Italy had and France had. We were expecting England just to bowl through the group stages, rack up 7-8 goals and just put everyone to bed early, and the exception has not been that. The one thing I will say, the one kind of mitigating factor for Southgate, and I don't want to be naive, but I don't believe that Gareth Southgate is either. He's been preparing for this tournament for 2 years. And the one thing he has done with England, I've been really impressed with, he had made them very tactically flexible. And they are certainly conservative in the first 2 games. You know, when you think Trippier at left back, you think Harry Kane dropping as deep as what he's dropping. There's no real fluidity. They look very solid. They look like they're built for a counter-attack. And I like the... I mean, I might be giving Southgate too much credit, but I think he's a smart guy. I know he's very methodical. And I can't help feel he's preparing for something. He's maybe thinks that if they top the group and they get that Germany, Portugal or France teams, that they will need to be conservative. They will need to be counter-attacking. They will have to be defensively solid, because you think that the team that played against Scotland and the way they played is the way they'd play if they came out and played France or Germany. No, it probably is a bit of a stretch to think that he's so calculated that he's playing for second in the group. I mean, that really would be very, very risky. But there's an element, maybe he doesn't want to blitz the group. I don't know. I'm just trying to talk about that. I don't think this would happen by accident, you know, that England have become very, very flexible in the way they play. So I think there's something behind it. I hope there is, because if they go out with a whimper, there'll be absolute carnage.
What Damien, do you, like with the Czechs tomorrow night? Interesting, we were talking earlier on about Gareth Southgate saying after the game, the Scotland game the other night, that Harry Kane will play in the final group game. What would you do if you were England manager? Is like the temptation to take him out of the firing line now, like get a bit more rest into his bones and get him firing again for the knockout stages, versus we just got to go again and hope that he comes good. What would you do if you're England manager?
Yeah, I was listening to you guys discussing it there, and you play him. He's your main man, and I think that was more a vote of confidence for Harry Kane. I know you said earlier there, you know, Dominic Calvert-Lewin be sitting on the bench. I mean, Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Harry Kane are two different things. For me, Harry Kane's undroppable. You know, he's dropping deep. Now he does that sporadically for Tottenham sometimes because he does stay high up the pitch, and sometimes he can be not involved in the game for long periods. So you do see him dropping deep just to get a feel of the ball. Against Scotland, I can't help but feel that he was instructed to do that because he did it so often. But he's going to play. He's the main man. He's the top goal scorer. He's everything good about England. He's captain, and I think that was more of a vote of confidence, or just to shoot down any rumours, you know, and just to give Harry Kane. I don't think Harry Kane was worried about his place in the team, but I suppose the man just wanted to put a stop to those rumours. But he's going to play. For me, he's got problems with the three number 10s that they play, you know, with Sancho, Grealish, Foden, Mount, Sterling. You know, you got 5 or 6 for 3 positions there. And if you're going to play with 3 narrow, you need some width at left back, and you have with Chilwell and Shaw. You have got the option. So why he's playing with Trippier, I'm not sure. That's what I'm talking about, that he is a calculating guy, and maybe he is preparing for the Germany or Portugal or the France, possibly. But I think the problem he's got at the minute is he likes Sterling. He seems to have a bit of a grow for him insofar as he's done well for him all the time. And the clamour to get Grealish in, and I know we spoke last week about you have to have some pace in your team because Harry Kane isn't necessarily a guy who's going to run in behind, and I think that's what he wants Sterling in the team for. But you got Jadon Sancho. Now, Jadon Sancho isn't necessarily a guy that's going to run in behind. He'll get the ball at the feet and dribble with it, and that's why there's this big clamour for them to play Foden, Mount and Grealish. And I think if you play those 3 with Harry Kane, you're going to get very stuck in the mud, and performance is already stuck in the mud, but he's struggling for that balance. But Southgate will be aware of all of these things. And again, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I think that he's kind of maybe keeping the reins on England, possibly. And if they can get out of the group and counter-attack their way past France or Germany or Portugal, then maybe there's more to come.
Yeah, the clamour for Grealish is an interesting one, and we're familiar ourselves with trying to get a player like that, sort of with that creativity about him onto the pitch, and it did seem like he had a bit of an impact when he came on the other night. If you were picking a team, hypothetically, for England make the Euro final, regardless who they're playing, is Grealish in that 11?
No, I still go with Mount and Foden. I think they're better players than him. I think they're smarter. I think Grealish is very, very good. But I just think that those two, Mount has had a fantastic season at Chelsea. But one thing I would question Southgate in is the speed at which he made the substitutions and his reluctance to change it. And it looked like he was settling for a 0-0 draw, but he wasn't throwing the kitchen sink at Scotland. That's the only question mark I'd have over him. I think the team he picked was pretty decent. But you've got to get better players on the pitch. You know, when Sterling wasn't having a great game, why he persisted with him, I'm not sure. So that's the only question mark I would have about him. The other stuff, I think the starting level he picked was pretty good.
I don't know, Damien, if you saw the quotes from Stephen O'Donnell on marking Jack Grealish, and clearly he'd got the inside scoop from John McGinn, a good friend of Jack Grealish's, in terms of how to manage him and how to psych him out of it, I guess. And he says, thankfully John McGinn had given me some tips. He told me that if he comes on, I need to get nibbling in his ear, but don't be critical, be complimentary. So the second he came on, I was telling him how good looking he was, that I loved his calves, and asking him how he got his hair to look like that. Have you ever heard of sledging being done in a positive, complimentary way?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you want to be nice to players, you want to upset them. But look, Jack Grealish is a fantastic player. And I suppose if you kick him, you could get him riled up. But again, I mean, as good now as Grealish is, and I know the Villa fans will probably hate me for this, I sometimes think that there's so much more in him. He always has an extra touch. He always seems to draw contact. You know, he does get fouled. I'm not saying he's a diver, but I think there's a lot of times he could release the ball a split second earlier and keep the attack moving, but he sees players coming and he draws fouls, and sometimes that breaks the rhythm of the game. So maybe that's the reason that Southgate's not playing him. No, he is absolutely talented, don't get me wrong. He's a super player, but I just think the other two are ahead of him, Mount and Foden. But Sterling is the one for me as to why he plays him. He's probably the only player on the England team that runs in behind without the ball. And as I said earlier, you have to have a threat in behind. So he's got a couple of issues to sort out, but they're not in a bad spot. They're just not playing well. It's how he manages the criticism now and the kind of hype that's going to come around, well, the anti-hype, I suppose, the negativity that's going to come around that England haven't blown everyone away in 3-4-0 in both group games.
Jadon Sancho was an interesting one for me. Like you mentioned him there a minute ago, and the fact that he's sitting on the bench and not getting onto this team is quite surprising to a lot of German football journalists. I know that much. Do you think the fact that he's playing his trade in the Bundesliga and not the Premier League is counting against him, or is that maybe a lazy way of looking at it, that maybe he's just not in Gareth Southgate's current plans, or maybe he's going to be in use, against Portugal or Germany in the next round or later into the tournament? Like, would you have him in this team a bit more regularly than Gareth Southgate currently does? I
would have got him off the bench, certainly. But Gareth obviously has a certain tactical plan in mind for both games. Now, whether he's got that right or wrong, it would be difficult to say, but they've got two decent results. But I think I would have got him on the pitch sooner, definitely. No, he's a different type of player to what they have. As I said, Grealish, Mount and Foden are tricky number 10s that pop up in pockets and get turned and bounce passes. Sterling's the only one that runs in behind. And he's a bit more of a traditional winger. He does kind of stay really, really wide, receives the ball, runs inside, runs down the line. He's a very, very good player, don't get me wrong, but obviously the manager didn't see Sancho's attributes helping them win the game. I'm not saying the manager's correct in that, but he obviously didn't see it. But I think as the tournament goes on, we will see a bit more Sancho, because it's just not kind of clicking at England for the minute. But I'll give Southgate the benefit of the doubt.
Might just touch briefly on Scotland then before we move on, but look, we've discussed Billy Gilmour already, but like you spoke about Scotland on this show, Damien, before the tournament started, and you said like they play in a patriotic manner. You actually said that they could get out of this group, which not a lot of people were saying, to be fair to you, and they have impressed in that regard. But they're buying into what Steve Clarke is doing is one thing, and that's certainly one thing that you spoke about as well. And even to see Stephen Reid along the sideline with him there, it's great. Like we're always looking for these Irish links, but clearly there's something that Steve Clarke, Stephen Reid and the rest of the coaching team are getting very right. They have a good team spirit, I think.
Exactly right. As I said at the top of the show, it's about the collective. And the collective will get you pretty far. Won't get you to the final, won't win you this tournament, but it can get you with the group, especially when there's 3 from 4 potentially to get out. And they can kick, scream and battle. They hopefully will win their last game. They got a draw against England, which their work ethic, they deserved it. So I think they've got a great chance of getting out of this group. I hope they do as well, because I love to see a patriotic nation of players that are united and all looking in the same direction. Steve Clarke is a great manager for that. His track record in England, in the game, and the jobs that he's had has been that. Teams that have been built around the collective. And Stephen Reid's a really great fella. He was on Roy Hodgson's staff for a year when I was there at Palace. So I know exactly what type of guy Stephen is and type of coach that he is. And he's such a player-orientated guy. He joins in the sessions, he has fun, and he has the crack with the lads. And I'm delighted for him as well.
We might move on then, Damien, to Group A, and Wales and Italy yesterday, of course, playing out that 1-0 win for Italy, but goal difference means Wales finish second and progress, and they'll play their last 16 game in Amsterdam, so they're on the road, but they'll play against the team who finished second in Group B, so they'll both find out their opponents, both Italy and Wales, today. Wales were impressive. I guess not a lot of people thought that they'd repeat a 2016 job, and they still have a long way to go to get to a semi-final, but what Robert Page and his team are doing is quite impressive, and they could have even got a result yesterday. Gareth Bale blazed a volley over the bar, but still a decent performance by the Welsh.
Yeah, very, very good. They have a certain way of playing, certain way of doing things, and they've been doing it for many years now. Started a while back under Gary Speed, and they've been playing some great football, and they've got a great conveyor belt of young players dotted around England, and some playing in the Premier League, young guys. And Wales have always had a habit of playing players in the national team that weren't necessarily regulars or even out of the under-23s at Premier League teams. So a lot of these players have had a lot of experience, even though they wouldn't be household names at first-team football level. So they have a fantastic way of doing things. I think the manager has just continued that. That's the benefit when you have one style, one ethos, one set of values that, you know, the managers can change, but the conveyor belt just keeps moving. So the issues they've had around their manager, I'm not surprised it hadn't disrupted them too much. But look, we can't get past the fact that they have two world-class players in Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey. And, you know, you saw them link up for a goal there in the last game. Wonderful ball and controlled by Ramsey, and a fantastic finish. So, you know, when you kind of compare the Welsh to our own situation here, we're not a million miles away from them. It's just that they have that cherry on top in Gareth Bale. And hopefully in years to come, we can produce types of players that have that capability, that type of calibre.
When you say cherry on top, Damien, like I sort of look at that almost like he's the cake in a lot of ways, to use that analogy. Like I feels like or maybe I feel as if a lot of people are overstating maybe where Wales' position in life is at. Now look at obviously they've made it through, and they're, from a manager point of view, he's been in since the back end of last year. He's got no pedigree in the game at all, particularly in terms of the level that he's managing at now, which is an achievement. But I mean, they stole a draw against Switzerland in round one. They beat arguably the worst team in the tournament in Turkey, and were hammered essentially 1-0 by Italy, admittedly. Are we? I mean, they're at the extremities surely now of what's achievable for them.
Oh yeah, I think they get out of the group, and if they get a reasonably good draw, or whoever they end up playing, they can produce a performance. But they're going to come up against a team that are vastly superior to them, and they'll get caught. When I say that Gareth Bale was a cherry on top, and you're saying he's a cake, I just mean that, like, you look at the Irish performance and the Welsh performance are very, very similar. But when you have that world-class player on top to finish off the moves, someone that can do something special, something, that X factor, you know, it's the most difficult thing to do in football is to create and score goals, and they're blessed that they have Ramsey and Bale. And I think if you took them out of the Welsh team, there's probably not a whole pile between our national team and their national team, you know, and we just have to produce players of that level. So you always have a chance when you got Gareth Bale in your team, and then the rest of the team is based around keeping clean sheets and trying to stay in the game. So with them too, they certainly have a chance, but I don't see them getting to the semi-final like they did in the previous tournament, no.
Is tiredness an issue for a squad or a team like Wales that maybe don't have the strength and depth of the likes of, say, England or Belgium or Italy? I mean, there was a great quote, an interesting quote from Aaron Ramsey, Damien, after the match last night, and he said, speaking to Euro2020.com, he says, "I'm happy on a personal level. I don't even remember the last time I played 3 times in a week." Which is a fair point. We kind of take these games for granted. We come home from going into town or going to the just anywhere, and the games are on the TV, and you kind of enjoy watching them. But at the same time, you have to remember these players are playing a lot of football. Like, is that an impact on some squad like Wales, where strength and depth is clearly an issue?
It can be, but I think when you look at Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey and a lot of their team, you know, they're not playing 50, 60 games a single season. I think that is an issue for England, because a lot of those England players have played 60 plus games. And then you're going into a very, very concentrated environment where you're locked up in a hotel, and mental fatigue really is probably the biggest danger when you're in these camps. It's like when you go away for pre-season for 3 weeks and you're stuck in a hotel, it can get very, very repetitive, you know, coming down for breakfast, going to training, coming back, going to the gym, having lunch, sitting around the lobby of the hotel, playing computer games. You know, you can do your best to break up that monotony. But I suppose the players that are playing always will be focused, because they know they have a game in 2 days' time, and they're the ones that will be resting, recovering. They don't mind going to bed. It's the rest of the squad, the lads that aren't playing. Can you get enough minutes into them that if you do need them, they're still fit? Their training sessions can be tailored, that if someone does need to come off the bench, they have enough work done. You know, I always found that when I was away with Ireland, like, food became a bit of an issue, because, you know, there was always, you know, food on, and you find yourself eating just out of boredom. And not putting on weight, but you just feel a bit sluggish, you know, because you're not maybe training as hard as what you would have done at your club. And then you find yourself sitting around the hotel, lying in the hotel room, you're having sandwiches, you're having a cup of tea, you're having a cake, and then dinner's coming, and you're having probably more than you would do in your normal environment. So I think that is a bit of an issue for these major tournaments. But the patriotic element, really, of being in your country, I think that'll keep most of the players focused, their energy levels up, especially if they're doing well and they got a chance of getting out of the group, or they got a chance of doing some damage in the tournament. So it can be, but I think that most coaching staff now are aware of those pitfalls and have measures in place to combat most of it.
You forget about those things like the off-pitch things, and James Horncastle was on OTB AM with Gerard Owen this morning talking about the Italians and the fact that this I guess notion of Il Gruppo and Roberto Mancini has clearly instilled this, I guess, feel-good attitude in the camp. And there's been music played at training sessions, and there's been table tennis tournaments and all this sort of thing, and that must be important for a team like Italy, who, by the way, if we remember as well, didn't make the last World Cup in Russia. So clearly there is an importance in keeping players happy off the pitch. Huge.
When you're away and you're cooped up, really, it's very, very difficult. Boredom and players just kind of sitting around and just not being as focused as what they should do. It can be a problem. So you do put on table tennis tournaments, to be honest with you, quiz nights and all that carry on. That all does happen. And it does pass away a couple of hours, but ultimately you're going back to your hotel room that you've been in for 10 days and you're thinking, geez, I'm not, especially the ones that aren't playing, as I said, they're thinking, well, I'm not going to play in the next game or whatnot. So it can be difficult. But I suppose that the players, as I said, the patriotic element keeps them focused, keeps them concentrated, then they should be okay.
Might move on to Group of F and what I'm calling the Group of Death. Adrian is not in agreement with me that it's the Group of Death anymore, but Portugal-Germany was an excellent game on Saturday, Damien, and a result that maybe not a lot of people saw coming, but this German side cannot be ruled out of any major tournament. And look, Jogi Löw is clearly departing his role after this tournament to be replaced by Hansi Flick, but could they mount some sort of a challenge? Could they get to a semi-final or a final in this tournament?
I don't know. I think it was you guys I was on with last week, and I kind of described Germany as a wounded animal, and I just kind of thought, any wounded animal that knows its final days are on the horizon will have one last kick, one last fight, and that's how I kind of see this German team at the minute, and maybe that was it against Portugal. It was a great performance. Portugal, I thought, were really, really poor. I mean, really poor. Which is surprising because they were the team that are on that upward curve, towards the peak of their powers, and they were supposed to kick on and really dominate this group, and it was supposed to be between them and France really for who could get top spot, and then Germany and to kind of squabble over third. So really surprised at how poor Portugal were, but I still think that all's not well at Germany. I think there's a couple of issues there, and again, I'm not saying that they can't go deep in this tournament, but I think as soon as they come up against in Italy, a real powerhouse, which they will do potentially in the quarterfinals and semi-finals, then I think that they will be put to the sword. But listen, they're still a very, very good team, don't get me wrong, but in the context of winning this, I'm not so sure they have enough, or they're in a good enough place.
Like, Jogi Löw is a manager who, I guess, received a lot of criticism, namely for not getting to that World Cup in 2018. They had that 6-0 defeat to Spain as well. Look, they lost to North Macedonia. They've had a lot of poor moments in the last couple of years. But when you look at decisions like, I guess he got rid of Mats Hummels and Thomas Muller, brought them back in, and clearly on the evidence of Saturday, that was a great decision. Joshua Kimmich at wing back, a lot of people kind of question his deployment in that role, but when you saw him at the weekend in that position, he was outstanding. So clearly there are decisions being made at a managerial level in Germany that are good for the team at the moment.
Well, they are, but they're not. When you're arriving in a major tournament, you want consistency. You want to know what your best team is. You want to know what your plans are. And the fact that he got rid of players and brought them back in, all just doesn't seem well there. Even the victory against Portugal, they were very, very good. But you could still see that they weren't the juggernaut that the Italians were, the well-oiled machine that the French are. So they're not a million miles away. I'm not saying that Germany are terrible by any stretch. But as I said, in the context of winning this, I just think that as soon as they come up against an immovable force, I think that all those frailties that we saw against North Macedonia, Spain, will come to the fore. Because when you come up against real difficulty in games, when you come up against teams, you're like, oh my God, these are going to be real, real hard to beat. That's where you have to dig deep and really grind out a win. And when the pressure comes on, then you'll know whether you have that in the locker or not. And I think that when they get deep in the tournament, that they will get found out a little bit.
It's interesting the way this group is set up now, because that win for Germany means They sit on 3 points with Portugal, one behind France on 4. And Hungary have that point as well now, picked up against France at the weekend. So all 4 teams can progress to the next round, which sets it up quite nicely. Like, you mentioned the fact that it is a tournament. We have to kind of remember that the teams can start off poorly and still progress and do good things, because Portugal in 2016, we'll remember, drew all 3 of their group games and went on to win the tournament. So there is that element of, Portugal losing 4-2 to Germany on Saturday isn't a disaster. They could still go on and win this tournament.
Well, it is, and that's the kind of having 24 teams in a tournament, is that 3 teams out of 4 are going out. And I did kind of tune in with you guys at the start, and you were kind of saying how happy you were with the tournament. It's been okay, but I don't think it has the feel yet of real knockout football, of real competitive stuff where a serious powerhouse is going to go home out of the group stages, as it should be. Even when we get out of the group, there's teams that finish third there that really shouldn't be in the knockout stage. You should go straight to the quarterfinals and have a real good go at it. That's my belief. 16 teams was the perfect number. You got great games from the start. You had that real threat of going home very early. If you lost your first group game, you knew you were under serious pressure. Whereas now teams are losing and drawing, and they still have a chance of going through in the final day. So that's just my own personal take on it. I haven't really bought into the knockout real feel of it just yet. And I think that once we get out of the group stage, that will certainly come. But yeah, it's interesting that Hungary have a draw and they still have a chance that they could nick a result, another kind of decent performance from them and a poor performance from the opposition. And they could get out of the group, of course they could. But realistically, I think when you look at all the teams that are bottom of the groups, I think they'll probably finish bottom, and all the main lads will get out, and then the tournament starts for me.
Like that goal from Attila Fiola for Hungary just before half-time on Saturday kind of had the celebrations were almost reminiscent of Robbie Brady's goal in 2016, and just the crazy scenes and jumping over the fence, and kind of, I think he knocked down a journalist table as well. Just the whole stadium went mad, and that was the impact of having the game in Budapest. But like that's what this tournament can do. You can have moments like that, and even if Hungary depart this tournament, and look, they couldn't even beat the Republic of Ireland a couple of weeks ago, but like they can always hold on to that result, and drawing 1-1 with the world champions in a major tournament is not a bad achievement at all.
Yeah, I take your point, absolutely, and I think that expanding tournaments does have a more of a league feel to it, and it's not a bad idea. And obviously UEFA have the finances when you have these tournaments played all over Europe. It's great for them, but I was just a fan when it was 16 teams, and from the get-go, as soon as you came through the front door, it was time to go. Whereas now you can afford to lose games, have a draw, and then win your last game, and you're still going to get out of the group. But that's just me. I'd be a traditionalist in that respect. But I do take your point that it's great for Hungary, and it was great for us in 2016 when Robbie scored. But when you see certain teams there in the European Championships, I just don't feel that they should be there. 16 team was perfect for me. But that's just my personal opinion.
We had Eamon Dunphy on the show on Friday, and he was kind of talking about Paul Pogba. Not a fan of Paul Pogba at all, as it turns out. Eamon Dunphy, people kind of give the suggestion that he has more freedom to play at international level than he does with Manchester United. But what's your take on Pogba? Because we know he's a bit of a leader in that dressing room, at least with France, and clearly as someone Didier Deschamps trusts. So where do you sit in the whole Pogba situation?
I love him. And I always have done. I think you go back through any time we spoke about Pogba, I think he's a world-class player. I think he really is. I think he's the type of player that you build around. He's type, and maybe not build around, but he's the type of player that you consider when you're putting your squad together, that you want to get the best out of him. He's a free spirit. He probably doesn't like being tied down to kind of one thing. He's the type of player you go, just go on the pitch, whatever you feel, just do it. Whatever you're thinking, just do it. And we'll kind of fill in the pieces around you, And obviously that's what N'Golo Kante brings to that French team, that Pogba can have his little moments. If he wants to drop deep, he can get it deep. If he wants to push on, he can push on. But I suppose at club level, invariably he plays from the left, and he finds it very, very difficult to get into the game. And he drifts inside a lot, which, Luke Shaw then can bomb up on the outside. But it's just, the way Man United are set up, Bruno Fernandes has that role of the creative freedom to go and enjoy yourself. And I think that if Pogba was playing the Bruno Fernandes role, in my personal opinion, and given the same kind of leeway that Fernandes is given, I think you'd get equally as much out of Pogba. You know, Pogba took the penalties, and Pogba was allowed to kind of just drift and get on the ball and play passes. And when he gives it away, everyone says unlucky. But unfortunately with Pogba, there does seem to be a kind of thing around him. When he makes a mistake, he does get crucified for it. You know, if he gives a square pass, where if he gives one away, everyone's just onto him straight away. Whereas other players don't get that, and that unfortunately is perception with Pogba. So look, I like him. I think he's a world-class player. I think when you consider your squad, kind of when you're putting your squad together, if you take Pogba into account and let him play to his strengths, he can do some serious damage as a footballer, as we see with France. And I think France do take him into consideration. But Manchester United, unfortunately, have never really seen consistently the best of Paul Pogba. And that's just unfortunately the way that United squad has been put together.
Some chat that he's going to be that Manchester United are going to make him the best played player in England. Damien, I don't know if you've seen that. Is he worth that?
I think he could be, yes. But I think you have to utilise him. If you're going to give him that money, then you need to go and buy an N'Golo Kante type player, and then give him the same creative. That gives him the same creative freedom that he has at France. You know, when Man United play those two number 6s, there's only room for one number 10 or one number 8. Unfortunately, that's why he ends up playing on the left, so it's very, very difficult for him. But if you're going to make him a highest paid player, then you need to move pieces around the board to get the best out of him. You really do. Or you move him on and you say, you know what, Bruno Fernandes is our guy, and he's going to be our creative player, and we're going to give him, because Solskjaer has spoken many times about playing with wingers, saying that, you know, Manchester United tradition is wingers. So if you're going to play with wingers and one number 6, then you've got two number 8s or two number 10s. But if you're going to consistently play with two number 6s, then there's only room for one, and that's Bruno. So you either move him on, or if you do re-sign him, then you build a team around him. But I always thought he was a world-class player. I played against him in 2017 and was just in awe of how good he was. It was the year that him and Ibrahimovic played together. And he was just brilliant. He had that freedom, and Ibrahimovic just always knew where Pogba was going to play it, and had a great link-up. I remember before the game, vaguely, I don't have the exact numbers, but vaguely, the amount of times that Pogba received the ball and passed it to Ibrahimovic, it was the highest link-up of any player in that season. And I think that if you're going to do that, then you need to build a squad around him, because he can be a world-class footballer, but you got to utilise him to crack on it.
Went very quickly get your thoughts on today's games, Damien, and 4 games in total. We have 2 games at 5 o'clock in Group C. North Macedonia against the Dutch in Amsterdam, and then in Bucharest it's Ukraine against Austria, also from 5 o'clock. And then in Group B later on, Russia taking on Denmark from 8 p.m. in Copenhagen, and St. Petersburg is the venue for Finland against Belgium in that group as well. So the group's coming to a close. The Dutch, Damien, I know we spoke before the tournament and you weren't too optimistic about their chances, and I don't think anyone really was heading into this tournament. Where do you put their performances so far? Look, they've had a couple of good wins, but still some defensive frailties, you might say, without Van Dijk in that team. But can they surprise yourself? Can they surprise other people that maybe didn't fancy them, or are they still not a team that's going to go far?
I think that they're obviously going to get out of the group, but I don't see them getting to the final. I don't see them winning it. Similar to England, really, you know, not a bad side, but I think similar to what I said earlier, when they come up against teams that really put the squeeze on them, really make life difficult for them, and you got to fall back on some serious heart and dig out a result. I just don't think the Dutch have that. You know, they were pretty good in their opening game. They got pegged back, but they got it over the line. And again, when you watch them, I'm just not convinced with them. It just looks like that they're kind of a wing and a prayer type stuff. They're playing reasonably well, but it just seems to be built on matchsticks for me, and it could fall apart at any minute.
The Danish game then tonight is an interesting one, because they play Russia. They played a back 3 in that game against Belgium. Might revert to a back 4 tonight, you would think, but they have home advantage, and if they did win tonight, they could potentially still sneak into the last 16. We don't really know until tonight's games are finished, of course. But what impact? I know you had them down as dark horses heading into this tournament. You had no idea, of course, what would happen with Christian Eriksen, but how do they react to that now? We saw them against Belgium, and they weren't awful in that game against Belgium, took an early lead, but can they progress and I guess go further into this tournament given what's happened?
I think so now that Eriksen is home and he's had his surgery and everything's fine, and the players have had some time to digest and process the emotions that they would have felt from the first game. So hopefully they can use that and get a result tonight, and then kickstart something for them, and then they can feed off that positivity or that good emotion that they have from the positive outcome with Ericsson, and hopefully put a little run together. The reason I tipped them is that if they come out of the group second, which I thought they would, and I don't think they'll get second, but if they can get out of the group, they haven't got a bad route to doing some damage in this final. So I hope they can utilise the positive feeling. I hope they can put something together. It would be great for them. You know, obviously Finland was the game where they would have pinned their hopes on winning, so that getting 3 points, that wasn't to be. Belgium, they would have expected to maybe not get anything from, but Russia they expect to get something from. So hopefully if they can get a win against Russia, they can just like spark them and get them moving, and then they can do some damage in the tournament.
Damien, great stuff as always this morning, and we'll check in again across the tournament, but enjoy today's action.
Thanks guys, see ya.
Damien Delaney there, the former Republic of Ireland international, with us this morning. Adrian, I'll get your thoughts on today's games very shortly. I just want to remind people listening at home as well, our OTB Sports Euro 2020 show is live with Paddy Power's Save Our Game, donating €10,000 to Irish football for every goal England scored at the Euros. Only one goal so far from that perspective. Unfortunately, Raheem Sterling in the opening game against Croatia, but still that game against the Czech Republic to come, and no doubt some later games in the tournament if they progress. I just want to bring you the 4 big games, of course, today in the Euros, and a quick look at some of the Paddy Power markets for these games today. Have a look.
On the 5 o'clock kickoffs in Euro 2020, we've got Group C to a conclusion. North Macedonia against the Netherlands and the Ukraine against Austria. Jason Murphy joins me. Jason, what's going to happen in these 2 games?
Yeah, so the first game, North Macedonia against Netherlands. Netherlands have now topped the group, and they're going to meet the team that finishes third out, Group D, E and F. Expect Netherlands to make a few changes and keep them a bit fresh, and that's why we've seen the price drift. As soon as they topped the group after the win on Thursday night, they went from 1-6 to 3-10 to win this match. We've seen Macedonia score in both their games, and I thought the Dutch were a bit suspect defensively, particularly against Ukraine. So the best angle I give you for this game is both teams to score. At the same time, we have Austria and Ukraine playing what might be a gentleman's agreement, because a draw will get both teams on 4 points, guarantees Ukraine going through in second place, and very likely Austria go through. The draw price was 9-4, but given the results on Thursday, it's tumbled in. We've seen it go odds on at one stage. So I'm not a big fan of backing the draw at that price, because goals can happen. So you can back Austria and Ukraine, double chance to win the match, around 8-11 if the draw price stays that short. The other angle I give you for that game is Yaremchuk and Yarmolenko have both scored in the opening 2 games. Yarmolenko is going to be on penalties. He was off the pitch when Malinowski missed the other day. But Yarmolenko, first goal scorer, 8-1. He won't play the 90 minutes, so you don't get the value in the anytime backing him. They'll want them fresh if they're getting a result in the next round. So just back him, first goal score market, around 8-1.
That's great, Jason. Thanks a million.
Yeah, 4 more games down for decision today. Adrian, I'll get your thoughts on these games now. We have a predictions table that's been running throughout the tournament, myself and Ger and Nathan, and here is how things stand. I actually held on to my lead at the weekend, so currently I'm on 10 points, Ger on 8, and football man Nathan Murphy on 6 at the moment, bringing up the rear here. But we've gone for 3 games today as well. So Ukraine against Austria, we've all opted for a draw in that game, interestingly enough. And Finland against Belgium, myself and Nathan going for Belgium. Ger going for a left field one. Ger is going for Finland to beat Belgium in that match. And then Russia against Denmark, all 3 of us opting for the Danes. I might get your thoughts, Adrian. I know North Macedonia, the Dutch, is a bit of a damp squib in that North Macedonia are pretty much gone and the Dutch are pretty much through. So do you fancy the Dutch in this game, or how do you reckon it'll go?
Yeah. No matter, like, even if they rest, like Holland, the reality is Netherlands could pick a team of players who aren't even in their Euro squad and still end up beating North Macedonia. Or technically, that should be what should happen. So I do expect that, no matter how many players that they rest, that they'll get that done. But the other game is interesting, and I look at it feels like I'm sitting on the fence to go the exact same way, but I was thinking about it last night. And Ukraine, Austria, it's a straight out shootout, obviously, between the two of them. What do you read from the games they've had so far? They've both done exactly what you'd expect so far. They've beaten Macedonia, lost to Netherlands. And I think that the runners-up in this group are going to get Italy in the next stage, which, as we know from what we've seen, are absolutely best avoided. So, look, both probably could end up going through. Got to fancy Ukraine. Jason mentioned Yaremchuk there in his when he was tipping up the odds for tonight. He's in good form, scored a couple of goals already. So if it was going to go one way, on that basis, I might go Ukraine. But I think an Ireland-Holland scenario is probably what's likely, and they play it out to a draw, I would think.
It's funny you point that out as well, because England, I guess, are probably better off finishing second in their group in terms of who they play in the next round. I know that if they finish top, which they likely will, they'll play second place in that Group F with Portugal, Germany and France. But similarly in that group that you mentioned, like, you might be better off finishing third and hoping you progress and don't play Italy by finishing second. So yeah, it's strange how these permutations have worked out, and I guess it's hard to figure it all out. But we'll see now this evening. Those games at 5 o'clock, North Macedonia, Netherlands and Ukraine, Austria. Then in Group B, Adrian, so Russia against Denmark is a decent fixture lined up for 8 o'clock, and Finland against Belgium. Ger opting for Finland in that game, very interestingly, I think. But are you along similar lines? Can Finland cause a bit of a shock?
They can't. He's trying to. I mean, he's gaming it, and I like that. Like, he's trying to back on some. I don't know what the odds on it would be, but they must be exceptionally. Jason might have mentioned they're exceptionally high. Finland get anything done there with good reason, and Belgium are going to win. Like, there's no question about that. There's not even a draw. It's not even a possibility. Belgium are going to win that game, and that will, like you were chatting about with Damien earlier on, will leave the door open for Denmark a little bit. 3 teams on 3 points, so it'll come down to goals difference. Maybe if I'm Russia, I'm trying to sit in and contain as much as you can and get the point that I need there. But Denmark did make Belgium work for that win in Copenhagen on Thursday, and maybe it suggests that they're now in the right frame of mind, like Damien mentioned, for all the reasons that have been much documented. That maybe that's the evidence that says, like, running that Belgium team close and going ahead against them, obviously, and as I said, making them work for that 2-1 win, maybe suggests that there's something about this Denmark side, enough for them to get it done tonight, maybe enough to make the next stages. I think that everybody would love to see that happen and love to see them go deep in the tournament, given how traumatic the opening few days obviously were for them. Yeah, we're all definitely behind Denmark for sure. Interestingly, it's Russia's first away game at a major tournament in 2 years. They've played their first 2 games of the group stage this year in Russia, and of course host to the 2018 World Cup. So strangely for them, they have to travel to Copenhagen for this one and finally play away from home. So that should be a decent game, but that should play into Denmark hands, you'd imagine, at the Parken Stadium. But listen, Adrian, great stuff this morning. Thanks a million for all of that. Thanks, Shane.
We'll check in again across the tournament, no doubt. We'll have a different member, of course, of Team Off the Ball every single morning here on the Euro 2020 show. So we're sharing the love across the Off the Ball office. If you missed any of the show this morning, the full podcast will be up very shortly on the OTB Sports app and on otbsports.com as well. The full video of the show is on youtube.com/off the ball. And as I said, as usual, we'll have all the clips and best bits from the show up on our Twitter and Instagram at Off the Ball, or myself on Twitter at ShaneHannon01. I'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday morning from 11 a.m. We'll be in the company of Daniel Harris, talking England and plenty more besides. Phil Egan will be alongside me as well in studio for that episode. So same time, same place tomorrow morning. Enjoy the football today and have a good one.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power's Save Our Game. England's goals total 10k so far for Irish football. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.